I look at the Irish squad, and I just think when I look back at the New Zealand game, obviously we were pressurized into making more mistakes than we normally would. Obviously, we were under pressure at the scrum in particular. But a big part of that defeat was we didn't have a huge bench to bring on, and I looking back at the Six Nations. Okay, we had an amazing first game against France, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure that we have that impact off the bench in enough positions to be a team who will get back to number one in the world, or we may get back to number one in the world, but it's going to be relying on the same faces, if you get me. So, and this isn't a criticism of Farrell. I think, to be fair to Farrell, I think he's a good selector, and I think he's always made players better going into camp, etc. But I just think that this year in particular, we haven't, like at the moment, you would say, let's just take Leinster for example. Like Ireland are developing Leinster's tens rather than Leinster developing Ireland tens. You know, if you think that Frawley and Prendergast are going to South Africa, and you would imagine, okay, you'd imagine Frawley be on the bench as a 10, covering 10, and if that happened, Jack Crowley, he's next man in. He hasn't played a 10 enough for Leinster for me to be saying that, and I rate him. I think he could play a 10 for Leinster, but he hasn't played enough of 10. And then obviously Sam is a really, really exciting prospect, but again hasn't had a huge amount of game time. And then just in general, yeah. Like, and this isn't like I know there's some people think, oh, Farrell is biased towards Leinster players. I actually don't think he is, but and I think there's been some really good performers in Munster. Tom Ahern in particular, he's injured, so he's out. But realistically, there hasn't been enough happening in the other provinces. Like I think Cormac Izuchuku, he has shown, and he's got picked. You know what I mean? He has shown. So I'm not. This isn't criticism of Farrell. This is a criticism or a question around. We've had a lot of good under 20 sides over the last couple of years, like France. Yes, we have struggled to bring enough of them through, and I think the problem, Murray, is that there's a log jam in Ireland. So if you come out of under 20s and show that you're a good provincial player, you'd end up kind of staying in the system. It's getting a little bit more ruthless now. You're seeing, some good pros moving this year, but in general, they kind of stay in the system all the way for the whole career, and yet it's pretty obvious that they're not going to be able to maybe help Ireland win a World Cup or maybe a Grand Slam, or maybe help the province win a Champions Cup in an impactful way. Obviously, I'm being incredibly harsh here, but that's missing at the moment, and that's what the Kiwis, that's what France, and you could say, France got the same situation as us in the World Cup, but I think for the next World Cup again, like we need to try and make sure that Farrell has more depth. And I'm not sure that this tour, Izuchuku probably won't play. I'd imagine there's no guarantee he'll play. But that's not the argument. The argument is there wasn't 45 players that Farrell was trying to work out how can he fit them into the squad. You know what I mean? I think it pretty much picked itself, which in some ways is good. But I think in terms of 1 year after World Cup, it's not ideal that there hasn't been more people putting their hand up. And like take scrum half, for example. I mean, obviously Gibson Park being injured is a huge blow. It's going to be interesting how Ireland adapt to that, because I think he's at the core of how Ireland play. But I think Caelan Blade, I think his end of season form was quite poor. I think he dropped off, and that's down to maybe playing too much or whatever. But just and then I've the other two scrum halves in the same province. Like sometimes our system can actually make it quite difficult for Ireland, because in special positions it's quite limited who plays.
There's so few places for them to break into, and then there are a few, like obviously it's centralized system, but you have to respect the province's own will and autonomy and decision making around who plays. But like practically speaking, what would you like to see? Say, I'm imagining Brian Gleeson, that he has to play a certain amount of games next season, or Hugh Gavin, these guys, rather than, as you mentioned, being into a log jam. How do you improve the situation?
I think Murray, I would be in I would be in favor of the provinces have a little bit more cash to spend on quality foreigners. Okay, so who can help them, and then I would get rid of the rule that you can't get picked for Ireland if you don't play in Ireland. Okay, now I think the logic behind that is the internationals who are in the team at the moment, they won't leave, right? They get well paid, they get well looked after, and they know that it's more likely they're going to stay in the team. My problem is I think there's a certain amount of players who stay hoping to get capped by staying in the system, right? So what I would say is unless you're an international player and you go abroad, okay, if you hit form abroad, right? So if you go to Bristol and you carve it up. So if Marmion was carving it up for Bristol this year, or whatever, that he would be eligible for selection, okay, for this tour. Okay, now he hasn't carved it up to the level, but he'll be an example because obviously Gibson Park is out. So if Marmion was playing really well for Bristol, that he would be eligible for selection. And then when his contract's up, that effectively he has like the RFU. If the RFU try and bring him home, and he doesn't come home, well then maybe he becomes ineligible. You know, it's not an idea. I don't not believe that it's better for the majority of Irish players to be in Ireland contracted, but I think we're limiting our chances, and by some of those fringe players going abroad, it opens up maybe an opportunity. So, for example, let's just take Cian Healy, for example, right? So if Cian Healy, not now because obviously it's probably too late in his cycle, but when Andrew Porter became number one, you said, for Leinster in Ireland, if Cian Healy had been allowed to go to Racing, okay, just using an example, right, go to Racing, and became number one at Racing, right, and played 55, 60 minutes most weeks, whatever, right? Well, then you have a choice, then you have a choice of him over Porter, right, or him starting, Porter coming off the bench. But more importantly, a Jack Boyle or a Paddy McCarthy has a better chance of getting game time. And suddenly you have Cian Healy playing every week, Andrew Porter playing most weeks because obviously we manage their game time, and you have Leinster know if Jack Boyle or Paddy McCarthy are good enough to be on the bench for Ireland, right? So, and then you have Lockman, and then you have Buckley, and that's the only way I see we can increase it is I don't think Andrew Porter we should be trying to get Andrew Porter to go to play for Toolan, but I think if we opened up a little bit around the fringe players, and kind of, even if it's loan deals, whatever, like one player moving in a special position doesn't just give that player an opportunity to show how good he is. It also gives the youngster underneath him a chance to get more game time. And obviously the Leinster situation, if you take the tens, you know, if they hadn't made a call a year ago that Sam or Harry were better off going somewhere on loan for a year, you know, potentially one of them could now be good enough to come back to Leinster if that's what they want to do, and be number one. Or maybe not. Maybe they go and they're not as good as we think they are, and that's part of the sport as well. But I think it's quite a protective system, and again, like I don't think Irish rugby is doing badly. Some people come back to me on my article saying, "Oh, we used to be crap, and now we're good." And I don't, like, it is great that we're good, but I still think potentially we can be better. And I actually feel sorry for Farrell a little bit in terms of what he's picking from compared to what Razzie can pick from. And they're different models, absolutely, and there's different financial environments. And you could argue that the South Africans wouldn't have done it the way wouldn't have set it up on purpose the way it's become. But the draw of getting out of South Africa and making proper money for some of those players, the opportunity to potentially travel, etc., it's created a system where he has unbelievable depth in nearly every position.